This is a presentation I gave last night in Agra. Agra is northern Delhi. Um, I have a few friends there, Amitabh Bachchan, Shah Rukh Khan, um, some other friends too. So this is Google Meet, so this makes sense. It's a PowerPoint. But I started on it in about 2018, 2019. And I've given it 100 times. Faulkner's The Wasteland, Mimesis, Catharsis, and Empathy. That's based on Aristotle's theory of logos, uh, ethos, and pathos. So in this example, mimesis is pathos. Pathos is, I guess, pathos is being crazy or sad or nostalgic, um, psychotic, those types of things. Uh, Irrational. Catharsis is, uh, catharsis is, you can look it up. So I recommend looking it up. Empathy, but catharsis is, logos. Logos. No, sorry. Catharsis is ethos. Ethos is ethics. Empathy is logos or logic, and how the mind and the brain, since they're in the same place, must have some overlap, like in a Venn diagram. Some people say there can be zero, but if you think about Kandinsky, the overlap could be across all three, like in Van Gogh's paintings. Um, these are sources. Um, Noam Chomsky's the main source. Faulkner's The Wasteland. Um, Faulkner, he has never been known to use a word that might send a reader to the dictionary on Hemingway. Poor Faulkner, does he really think big emotions come from big words? One word Faulkner constantly uses, incredulous. So if you think about Yokopatawa County, right, those are the stories of Sup Penn, Addie Bundren, Ants, Budren, Jewel, Cash, Darrell, Cora, The Sound and the Fury, Benji, and Caddy. Those are kind of family stories. The Wasteland is a precursor to T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. Um, T.S. Eliot's was published in 1914. Um, my guess is they were around the same time. Perhaps even David Faulkner was a precursor to T.S. Eliot in some ways, who was Winston Churchill. Um, that's unlikely, but if Andrew Jackson was around in 1832, George Schultz was around in 1900, T.S. Eliot in 1914, um, it's more likely that Faulkner was a precursor to T.S. Eliot. The Wasteland is science fiction. There's a movie with Brad Pitt called Ad Astra. That's not really what it's based on. There's a great Scottish Enlightenment story. Um, so this one is more about not the storytelling, but mimesis. Mimesis is when you subvert verisimilitude, which is a paper that's probably been blocked, about, yeah, about Faulkner. So if you use the logo or cite the school or the plate, other than the place, the status update, if it's really your property, then there's no reason to cite any institution anymore because they block it. Um, so Ad Astra. This is a quote from Ad Astra. It's a little tough. Um, so okay, trying to shift. I have a touch screen, so but anyways, okay. There was something of the crucified. So this is a story about pilots and kind of American, in my mind, Americans in enemy territory in cities like Baghdad or Tehran or um, Cairo. Casablanca. There was something of the crucified about Monahan, too. Furious, inarticulate, not with stupidity, but at it, like into him more than any of us. So in my story, I said something about into. Into's a preposition in German, neben, zwischen, Geburtstag, vielleicht, das Vidania. It's a way of saying it. In German, it's very geometrical. In American, it's very algebraic. And to him, more than any of us had. So if you were looking at inverse psychology, it's like, why is into so stupid? Like in him, more than any of us, had distilled the C strums. And something Jumpa would do is say, well, I meant in. And then anything that follows is kind of a criticism. And that's what Charlie Rose says, is that fame today is those who are critical, right? I'm being critical of Jumpa. So that's kind of the ethos of fame. Than any of us had distilled the sea strums of the old lust and greed, waking at last aghast at their own omnipotence. And the idea there again to talk about the theme here is mimesis. So the simple thing of mimesis is you repeat with a difference, right? So the quote I gave in my presentation and I nailed it was that um, creative or repetition is invariably boring. It's persecutory, but it's invariably creative. Once you repeat, you eventually create a mimesis, a change in the repetition. So we call it a pattern break at some levels. Um, in the ocean, we break patterns. In the sea, we agree to disagree. So into is my comment, serves as the mental reality. I wonder if I can make it bigger. Okay. So into here serves as the mental reality underlying actual behavior. Here, his quality of being is weakly ambiguous. Chomsky. So KAHN's four nuances are the vital, sarcasm, um, the durative, unrequited love, and so on and so forth. Locative pain, accrued despair, versus C strums, right? The C strums at last aghast. So to go on with, this is really mimesis ad astra. So again, they're in this foreign country. Maybe they go from Russia to Ukraine. Boche, boche, she the innkeeper shrieked. Boche, boche, the innkeeper shrieked, spitting and slobbering, her gray hair broken loose about her face. And that's about portraiture. How do you define what fun is? And, is it lachrymose? Is it difficult? That one's fun. She turned and spat full at me. Did she literally spit? It seems no. Bocce is disparaging for cabbage. And this goes to Latin. That's Kennedy's quote on it. It means square head, I guess. Description, in action. So again, if you have dialogue to get to the fiction part, now, and the innkeeper isn't there, I add that. I'll have to be right back. I guess we'll stay here. And in action means her gray hair broken loose. So that's active. So her gray hair breaks loose about her face. You could get more active. Instead of obdurate, you could be durative, right? That's kind of a Lacanian notion of time in narrative. And then the semicolon, she turned, and that's like musical. It's like no one really cares at that point, right? Hopefully. Um, No, I don't have a criticism there. So I'll have to find. I'll be right back. Okay. So modifier making fun of the French. The old joke with the French is that, the best French posture is two hands in the air. That's how they ask questions. So what's catharsis, right? Catharsis, what's epiphany? What's heralded? So these are two examples. His blue figure struggling successfully over the green speckled lake. It's a common quote in today's America. Anagogical is kind of when you take, um, let's see, like Jesus walked on water, right? So when you take a religious fundamental cliche almost and you make it literary. The river kind of lives, it talks in a murmur. This I call recitation in method acting. The river talks in a murmur, gnarled, dimpless, no, gnarled, inertly, dimpled monstrously. Um, the river kind of lives 100 yards across. There's flotsam, um, you know, it beetles over the base, blah blah blah. So this is actually Ireland. This was from the Wall Street Journal, and all these people are fishermen. So when you think about Irish, the difference between Ireland and Boston, in Massachusetts and Vermont, there are farms. There are, and we talk about lambs and meat, chicken. Say these were chicken. Victory is a different one, I think. So it's a collection of about 5 or 6 short stories. So, I'd read a lot, and then I said, I'm going to do it because it was named The Wasteland. And in German minimalism, invented by Mary and Noam Chomsky, you get it done. So, Dormier, madame, he said, raising his voice a little. His spiked mustache beaded a little with rain. Again, now do you care? Beat it a little with, when you say spiked, it's up and down. Dampness beneath his strained yet assured eyes. I like spiked. I would say his vertiginous mustache beat it a little with rain, dampness beneath his strained yet assured eyes. And he repeats it like in Mimesis. Dormier, madame. Perhaps it's the same innkeeper. Perhaps it's Elga Bergson. Subject Dormier, and that's why I'm happy I'm doing this for the 100th time because I never got there. It generally means sleep. In Scottish golf, it could be something, something, something. Um, and same thing when you study, when you're a wordist, I'm a wordist, WPM makes it so. Um, it modifies it like in three, right? It repeats it, it can distort it, but it also creates nearness. So we'll run it back. Dormier, madame, he said, raising his voice a little. His spiked mustache beaded a little, realizing the dampness in his breath. Dormier, madame. Women wear violets pinned to their furs, appearing to bloom themselves like flowers in the languorous, treacherous air. So that's Hamlet. That's Hamlet, yeah. So the primrose path. Um, this is just because I got this far and I wanted to talk about it. So this is how dense it is if you think about it. Again, these generally are war stories in the wasteland, like T.S. Eliot's. Um, in the glare of that first rifle, he can see the gap in the wire toward where the officer was leading them. The moiled, rigid glints of the wire where bullets have nicked the mud and the rust from it, and against the glare, the tall, leaping peel, for example. So again, do you want to know syntax? a textual understanding, or do you want to know the semantics, the truth, the moral, the data versus that data point? And that's the difference between micro and macro. The affected object in the sentence is the wire. So this is the hardest war story I've ever read. Crevice. This is where the battle takes place. This is the battlefield. So this is from that story. Then it cracks, if you want to read it yourself, I'd stop listening. Spoiler alert. Then a crack springs like a sword slash beneath them all. The earth breaks under their feet and tilts like jagged squares of pale fudge, framing a black yawn on which, like a silent explosion, bursts the unmistakable smell of rotted flesh. So the crack is a great illusion for me. There are counter influences on his work. One is Gustav Klimt, who wrote about earthquakes and things of that nature. Whales, of course. Description is a unifying brushstroke. I'm not seeing it. Meant to create empathy through rhetoric. Modifier turns out to be a poetic device for photography. Again, happy to get this far. So Spinoza is Cervantes. Newton is someone. Paratero. I watch, or to watch closely, to observe scrupulously, like a patois. La existere. I appear, I arise, I think, therefore I am. I exist is a little different, but similar. Existential tends to be South American. We can leave it at that. Where are we? For answer, the sergeant moves the torch. It streaks laterally into the darkness. Wow. It's like Jack London's The Cave. Along a wall, a tunnel into, again, yawning blackness. So you can call that a pattern. You can call that mimesis. You can even call it recitation. You can take it and call it coloratura. The walls faceted with pale glints of chalk. Subject is an allusion to the cave. Good job. And you got to say the birchwood, the balsa wood is doing well. So again, if you think about repetition, repetition is known as boring. In the scientific method, it's considered boring, langweilig, langsam, slow, compliant, adhering. And in the end, it leads invariably to creativity. That's my moral. Thank you for joining. Do you have any questions?